We are entering my favorite section of the book of Genesis, from 37 to 50. It's devoted to the life of Joseph, except for next week is a little different, but once I'm back, we'll get back in Genesis 39, and Joseph really is the theme of the rest of the book. Actually, there's more discussion about Joseph than some of the more famous people in the Bible. Joseph is a great man, and actually, normally in the Bible, you find where it says, this is a hero of the Bible, and this is what they did right, and this is what they did wrong. Really, Joseph, there's no indication that he ever did anything that was wrong. We know that he sinned. He was obviously a sinner, but none of his transgressions are recorded in the Bible. So he is a type or a picture of Christ, which we're going to talk about at the end of this sermon. He makes us think a lot about Jesus because he points us to what Jesus is and will be. But it's a great chapter, Genesis 37. It's a great story. And this chapter, though, ends kind of negatively. So not to spoil the end of this chapter, but when we get to the end of this chapter, Joseph has been sold as a slave to Egypt. He ends up working for a guy named Potiphar, and that's how the chapter ends. I used to like to go to movies. I don't dislike them now. It seems like every movie now has some kind of agenda they're trying to push, where it used to just kind of be entertainment, And what would you do? You would go there and you'd have this story and you'd have this character who's doing good, but then it goes south and it looks like it's not going to work out for him, but then it works out in the end. That's typically how movies used to be. And I like it when the good guys win. We seem to be now where the bad guys win. That seems to be the movie theme now. But I love the kind of this attitude of like, you watch this guy who's doing good and then bad things happen to him, but then he prevails in the end. When you come to Genesis 37, here's a good guy who it doesn't seem to go very good for him. Like he does all the right things, but yet you come to the end of this chapter and he ends up being a slave. So it didn't work out for him in the short term. And that's one of the things we have to remember in life, is that life is not judged by what happens to me in the next 5 minutes. It's judged by what happens over time. And I do believe that if you follow God and do what is right, that God wins in the end. It's like this is the cliched statement, I've read the back of the book and I know who wins. So we live with that light that this is not the whole story, this is just a little section of the story, but it is easy to kind of get caught up in that little section and think, man, am I doing what's right anyway? And I've gone through periods of like that in my life. And I'm sure you have too, where you're doing what's right and it doesn't seem like anything's working out for you. In fact, it seems like the reverse is happening. And years ago, I was in kind of a particular moment of that in my life where it just seemed like things weren't working out. I was very discouraged. And I had somebody send me an email with this poem in it. And it really resonated with me in that moment, and it still resonates with me to this day. It's a poem by Mother Teresa. I don't agree with all of Mother Teresa's philosophy, but I do love this poem, and I actually bought a picture of it and have it in my garage, which is a weird place to have it, but I do have it. And one of the reasons why I have it in my garage is because when I pull my car in, I look at it every day, because I want to be reminded of the truth of this. And the poem is called Do It Anyway. And this is what it says. People are often unreasonable, illogical, and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, people may accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you are successful, you will win some false friends and some true enemies. Succeed anyway. If you are honest and frank, people may cheat you. Be honest and frank anyway. What you spend years building, someone could destroy overnight. Build anyway. If you find serenity and happiness, they may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today, people will often forget tomorrow. Do good anyway. Give the world the best you have, and it may never be enough. Give the best you've got anyway. You see, in the final analysis, it is between you and God. It was never between you and them anyway. And I've always loved that poem. And what I'd like to do today is look at the story of Joseph and kind of spin off of this. So I'm not plagiarizing Mother Teresa's poem, but I am spinning off of that thought of do it anyway. Because we see a young man here in Joseph who does a lot of the right things, good things, and it appears to not help him in the short term, but we know what happens in the long term, so we got to keep that perspective in mind. So let's go to Genesis 37, and let's look at verse number 1. It says, Jacob lived in the land of his fathers, sojourning in the land of Canaan. And this is an interesting statement. These are the generations of Jacob. So remember, last chapter we looked at the generations of Esau. So you had all of these names listed. We come to now, these are the generations of Jacob. We have one name mentioned. Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. So this gives us our first point, or first thing to think about, and that is, if you tell the truth, people will be angry with you. Tell the truth anyway. If you tell the truth, people will be angry with you. Tell the truth anyway. I do believe that Joseph was young, and when you are young, you tend to kind of spout truth no matter who it offends or who gets upset at you. There's really no filter on young kids. I'm learning that with my grandkids right now. They will tell me the honest truth. Like I gave Berkeley a hug the other day, and I told her, I love you, Burke, and she's like, your breath stinks. And that's cool. That's cool. I mean, it's like, I can't get mad at that. It's the truth. I mean, put a mint in it, put a mint in your mouth is basically what she was saying. But it's just that kind of that unfiltered truth, and I love that. And I really like this verse and don't like this verse, and that's Proverbs 27:6. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. So a lot of times a sign of friendship is that your friend loves you enough to tell you the truth. And here you have Joseph who is speaking the truth about his brothers to his dad. And I don't think this is a tattletale kind of thing. Like, I don't think Joseph's saying, hey, look at what my brothers are doing. Dad, this is what the boys are doing. I think that Joseph is asked by Jacob how the brothers are doing, and he tells them the honest truth. And it's good to have people in our lives who tell us the truth. We tend to do that when we're younger. When you're younger and you have kids around you and even immature people, they tend to just spout out the truth. But then as we get older and more mature, we tend to surround ourselves less with people who tell us the truth and more with people who tell us what we want to hear. But it's good, no matter how old we are, to have people around us who tell us the truth. And when they tell us the truth, sometimes it feels like a wound. I've had both of my knees operated on, and I'm glad that I did because I had torn meniscus in both of those, and so they had to go in and kind of clean it up. And they put me under, and they obviously, numb my legs, and when they did the surgery, I'm glad that I had that surgery done, but it was painful. It was painful for the recovery. It was painful for the wound to heal, but it was necessary in order to heal what was wrong with the inside. So a doctor cuts you, but a person who robs you and maybe wants to do you harm, they cut you too. It's the same cut in a sense, but one has good intent, one has evil intent. And the problem is a lot of times when somebody speaks the truth to us, it may be in criticism, it may be somebody who really loves you, but you all kind of feel it the same. And there's a temptation to push back. And I just want to challenge all of us that when faced with truth, we can see it as an opportunity to improve, or we can get angry at those who have told us the truth. And here, the reason why I believe this verse is in the Bible is because right off the bat, we see how the two brothers are going a distinctly different direction. You have Joseph is going one way, his brothers are going the other way. Joseph speaking the truth, his brothers live in this lie, and they get angry at anybody who does speak the truth. So right off the bat, you see the contrast between the two. If you tell people the truth, people will get angry with you, yet What is the right thing to do in spite of how it may end? We need to tell the truth anyway. So let's read what happens next. Then it says, now Israel, Jacob, loved Joseph more than any of his other of his sons, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Jacob, Israel, had 4 wives. We know that his favorite wife was Rebekah. Or not Rebekah, Rachel. That was Isaac's wife. But Jacob's favorite wife was Rachel. And Rachel, remember, couldn't have kids, and that's what led to all these other kids. And then he was also tricked into marrying Rachel's sister Leah, and Leah had a bunch of children. But finally, God opened the womb. Wow, can't speak today. I spoke fine in the first hour. I don't know what you guys are doing to me, but the womb of Rachel, and she has a kid, and this kid's name is Joseph. And Joseph's very special to his dad because finally he has a child, he has in particular a son through Rachel. Now, he loved Joseph more than the other kids. I mean, the Bible implies that, and he took care of him more. And the brothers got jealous about that. And I get that a little bit because I am the firstborn of our family, and when I grew up in the Doss house, when I was a child, my parents got married at 18. I was born when they were 19. And my dad worked as a timekeeper for the railroad. That's one of the things that brought us to Topeka was the Santa Fe. When I was born in Fort Madison, Iowa, we moved to Topeka. My mom taught kindergarten at a very small Christian school. So I would say at best we were lower middle class. I didn't grow up with a lot of money in our house. And my dad was very hardworking. I grew up throwing papers because my dad had a paper route and he'd go work for the railroad. We didn't grow up with a lot of money, and yet I had a great life. 3 times a week we had hot dogs and macaroni and cheese. And I love hot dogs and macaroni and cheese to this day. It's a great meal. I love it when the Royals have $89 hot dogs because you go there and get all the hot dogs you want. So I love that. But we just didn't have a lot. My dad would go buy the cheapest car you could buy. So my dad would buy Chevy Chevettes. We had a 4-door Chevy Chevette and a 2-door Chevy Chevette. Do y'all know what a Chevy Chevette is? It's not a Corvette. There is a massive difference between the two. The Chevette is a hatchback. And I remember being me, you would sit in the back seat. I mean, none of these minivans weren't even invented yet at that time. And so me and my 2 brothers would sit in the back seat of this Chevy Chevette with all the luggage touching the back of our head. We would drive to Kirksville, Missouri. The speed limit at the time was 55 miles an hour. Do you know how slow 55 miles an hour is? And my father would not drive 1 mile per hour over 55 because he was a law abider and he didn't want to get a ticket. So we drove 55. It would take 5 hours to go to Kirksville, Missouri. You would just fall out of the car and say, "Thank you, Jesus, that we have made it." But somebody told me once that every time you have a child move out of your house, it's like you got a raise at work. So I was the first one out of the house. Then John was the next one out of the house 2 years later. And I got to admit, man, my brother Stephen was living the high life. My parents bought a conversion van just when Stephen was there by himself. Do you know what a conversion van is? It's where they take a 15-passenger and they turn it into this. There's beds in the back. I mean, there's just big old cushiony chairs. I'll never forget the first time I came home and my parents had this big old conversion van sitting in the driveway. I'm like, "What is this?" And they're like, "This is our new car." And I'm like, "This is wrong, man. This is wrong." Like, Stephen's going to Kirksville in luxury, man. He's sleeping they lay in the bed down, taking naps. And I got to admit, man, I found myself getting really jealous. Like, this isn't right. Steve needs to suffer. Like, Come on now. You babies of the family, you're spoiled to death. Like they would take us to Kmart. Remember when Kmart was on 29th Street? They would take us to Kmart before basketball season and they'd buy our basketball shoes there. And you'd put these shoes on. Well, they tied them together so you couldn't steal them, you know. So Dad would have us try the shoes on, and you're trying these shoes on that are tied together, and you're like walking them, and you're like, how do they feel? I got no idea. So it's like, well, Dad, can I have some Nikes? And he's like, no. He says, I don't have money for Nikes. You earn the money for Nikes. So I'd mow yards and do all this stuff and bought these, I remember, $75 pair of shoes. My father thought it was outrageous. You spent $75 on a piece of shoes. Are you out of your mind? You know, a pair of shoes. And I actually learned, I bought these shoes, played one game in them, took them off, put them on the bus. We stopped at a Wendy's. Somebody came in the bus, stole all our shoes. Yeah, it was a terrible story. Do you think I got any sympathy from my father? So you know what I did the rest of the year? Played in the Kmart shoes. Let's go. Why am I telling you all this? I got no idea. I don't. I'm telling you this because I get the jealousy part. So here's this youngest kid who's got it. Dad loves him. He's so special. And you got the older boys that they're jealous of him. They're jealous of him. So that leads us to our second point, which is if you are favored, people will resent you. Appreciate God's favor anyway. If you are favored, people will resent you. Appreciate God's favor anyway. We're a funny group of people, aren't we? And I'm putting myself in this category too. I'm not casting stones up here. I'm just saying we are very sympathetic to people that have less than us. Like we see somebody that's struggling and they're just the guy sitting on the street begging for money. We feel so bad for him, you know. But let's be honest. We resent people that have more than us. Because our culture is set up that way. Our culture is set up to not focus on how blessed we are, but rather to constantly long to have what the other person has. That's the whole purpose of advertisement. Advertisement is set out there to make us envious, so I gotta go buy the iPhone 16 because I only have the 14. Like I'm 2 behind right now. And you have the what? You have the 16? And then I start to look at, well, I have the 14, so, and my mother-in-law who has the 7. But see, the difference between me and my mother-in-law is she don't care that she has the 7. She's perfectly content with the 7. The 7 takes phone calls. She can look on Facebook with the 7. But I need it in the slightly higher resolution. Right? So we're constantly pushed to have more, have more. And we tend to do this. We tend to resent the people that have more than us. And then a lot of you in this room have a lot. You're very blessed financially. And you don't want to do anything nice or enjoyable or fun because you feel guilty about it. And I think that's a mistake on your part. It's okay to take some trips. It's okay to enjoy some time with your family. You shouldn't feel bad because God's blessed you financially so you can do some things. Now, if you're posting on social or something just to rub it in people's noses, then your heart's not right, but it's okay to enjoy what God's blessed you with. If God has shown you favor, people are going to resent you, and we get too worried about what everybody else thinks about us, and instead of enjoying the life that God has blessed us with. That's what the Bible talks about in 2 Corinthians 10. When Paul is telling this church at Corinth, he's saying, not that we dare to classify or compare ourselves with some of those who are commending themselves, but when they measure themselves by one another and compare themselves with one another, they are without understanding. So can I put that in English? What he's saying is, if you live your life constantly comparing yourself to other people, whether more or less, you're a fool. It's foolish. Enjoy what God has blessed you with. Stop worrying about what the next guy has. Doesn't matter what the guy down the street has. You just enjoy the life that God has given you. And this is the problem with Joseph's brothers. Joseph is focused on how his dad has blessed him. The brothers are focused on Joseph. And we miss how blessed we are by not looking at what we have, but rather looking at what they have that we wish we had. Does that make sense? So if you are favored, people are going to resent you. It's amazing the jealousy that comes, and we'll talk more about that in a minute, but it's just, we've got to get over the fact that not everybody in the world is going to like us. We want everybody to like us. It doesn't work that way. I think I told you about this already, so sorry if I'm repeating it, but read a book the other day talking about how that there are 10% of the people in the world who, it doesn't matter what you do for them, the minute they meet you, they're like, I don't like that guy. And there's nothing you could do to change it. It's just like, that guy, I don't like him. There's 10% of the people that will love you no matter what. This was in a book about what seminary didn't teach me, is the name of the book. And it's like, when you pastor a church, you're going to have 10 people that they're not going to like you at all. That's a very encouraging thought. 10% of the people in this room don't like that guy, okay? 10% that'll love you no matter what. I mean, and it actually says in the book, you could run through the lobby naked and they would be like, well, he's just having a bad day. Yeah. And then there's the 80% that are just there. They're only going to follow you based upon your character, like who you are. But the point of the chapter was, you got to get over trying to make everybody happy, because there's 10% of the people in the room that don't like you to begin with and wish somebody else was up there. And we got to understand the same thing is true with us. Like, have you ever met somebody and you don't even know anything about this person, but you're already like, don't like them. Don't like them, don't know nothing about them, but don't like them. Don't even like how they looked at me. We've all done it, haven't we? So you can be the greatest, nicest person in the world, and yet if we get so focused on what everybody else thinks of me, that's just a miserable way to live. People are going to resent you. Keep your eyes on the Lord and enjoy the life that God has blessed you with. Let's read on. Man, we're not going to finish this chapter. All right, so look what happens then in verse number 5. Now Joseph had a dream. When he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. Now this is where I think you can see he's naive here. And he said to them, so this is the dream. Hear this dream that I've dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field. Behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright. Behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf. Okay. Oh yeah, this is going to go over great, isn't it? You guys laugh because you know what's coming. Right? His brothers said to him, are you indeed to reign over us? Or are you indeed to rule over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Verse 9, then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, behold, I've dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars were bowing down to me. But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow yourselves to the ground before you? And his brothers were jealous of him, and his father kept the saying in mind. A lot of people think that Joseph is kind of throwing it in their face here, and I do not believe that's the case. I believe that he is just a young, innocent kid. Because when you're young, you think everybody's for you. Like you do. And one of the hardest parts for me with my kids is seeing their innocence broken. Like, I got to tell you, I planted this church when I was 28. I was so disillusional about look, if I love Jesus and you love Jesus and we all get together, there's not going to be any problems at all. Oh man, was I wrong? It's called naive. It's called innocent. I was innocent. I'd never pastored before. And so then once you really pastor, you're like, man, this is a lot more challenging than I thought it was. And kids are very innocent. So I think he has this dream and he thinks his brothers are for him. Like he's not, what's the problem with kids? They don't pick up on the social cues. So he comes in, he goes, hey guys, I had this dream. And his brothers, who already can't stand the kid, go off on him. And then even his dad was kind of like, son, hey, we're going to bow down to you? But it says that dad's like, okay, there's something's going on here. So that leads us to the third thing. If you have dreams from God, people will be jealous of you. Focus on those dreams anyway. And I will tell you this, I think that these two dreams is what helped him through the days ahead, because he is going to get sold into slavery. He is going to have some very negative things happen to him in his life, but I believe that he believed that these dreams were from God and they were going to come to pass, and so he never gave up on the dreams. I wanted to make this whole sermon on jealousy because I want you to notice the line, verse 11, it says, and his brothers were jealous of him, and his father kept the saying in mind. I wanted to preach the sermon today on the poison of jealousy, because if you allow jealousy in your heart, it wrecks you. And it's very, very subtle. But more people are destroyed by jealousy than anything else. It eats you alive. It eats you from the inside out. Jealousy is something that you cannot see, but if you do not deal with it, it will destroy you. People who once had joy are now angry people because of jealousy. This is one of the downsides, I think, of our culture. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they're just like, everybody I encounter is mad all the time. Well, to me, the byproducts of that is because we're all jealous. We can't enjoy successes in our life. We're jealous of everybody else's life. And over a period of time, this makes us very angry people. So I want you to notice, so let me give you sermon number 2 in the 8 minutes that I have left, all right? But this was the first sermon that I was going to preach, and then I changed it to the one we're preaching today. But jealousy has 4 negative effects on your life. Number 1, jealousy affects your speech. If you go back up to the top of the passage, it says that when his brothers saw that this is verse number 4, that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. So jealousy affects your speech. You can't encourage anybody. You can't encourage that person because you're jealous of that person. So when you're jealous of somebody, like if they do a good job, you can't say good job because you're jealous of the job that they've done. So it affects how you speak. So what you do then is then you run down the successful person behind their back because you can't say anything good to them. If you can't compliment somebody or encourage somebody, this is a sign of a jealous heart. If you can't look at somebody and go, good job, man. If you work with somebody and they do a good job and it helps your business, you ought to be able to say, hey, it's a good job, man. Thanks for helping the company. But it's like, how do you figure that out? He's a moron. It affects our speech. It not only affects our speech, jealousy affects our speech, but it affects our vision. It affects the way we look at the world. So the brothers, Joseph looks at his brothers with innocence. His brothers look at him with hate. So when he runs up and says, hey guys, I had this dream, they don't see it from the perspective of maybe God's speaking to this kid. They see it from the side of, oh, now God's talking to this kid in dreams and I hate him even more. It affects how they see the world. Jealousy will affect your emotions. If you're jealous of somebody, the only time you're happy is when they're sad, when they're miserable. So you can't enjoy your life. You only enjoy it when others are suffering. That's the brothers. You're going to read later, they sell their brother into slavery. You know what they do? They sit down and have a celebration meal. Our brother's gone, eat up. So it affects your emotions. And then jealousy affects your actions. They in a sense, kill their brother. They sell him into slavery. They get him out of their life. This is why Jesus said, look out, man. Don't let lust get in your heart. Don't look at a woman to lust after her because you've started down the path of adultery. This is why pornography is so wrong. Because if you're married, you to be faithful to your wife. If you are allowing your mind to go to different places to lust after other women, you haven't done anything external, but you have started the process. The same thing is true with hate. That's why Jesus said, don't hate anybody, because what you've done is you started the process of murder. Because I hate this guy, and then you get to this point where I just want to do whatever I have to do to eliminate him. So we got to start way back here. That's what Jesus warned us about. Because once the heart is corrupted, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. That's what the Bible says. And so the brothers are jealous. That jealousy has taken root, and what it produces is the wrong kind of speech. Their vision, they can't see things the correct way. Their emotions are overtaken, and then it affects their actions. If you have dreams from God, people are jealous of you. Focus on those dreams instead. That's what Joseph did. You see the difference between the brothers? Let's go back to the story. So verse number 12, it says, his brothers went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem. Now do we remember Shechem? You remember that story, the uncomfortable sermon? You remember the story of Shechem? The last place in the world I'm going to take my cattle is to Shechem. But here they go. Their brothers, they're just kind of crazy, so they go to Shechem. And so Israel said to Joseph, are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them. And he said to him, here I am. Now there's no Apple phones, so there's no Find Friends or Life 360. There's none of that. So he knows his boys are near Shechem. He knows the last time that was a horrible circumstance. Maybe they're going to get revenge. He's worried about his boys. So he says, Joseph, will you go check on the boys? Will you go check on your brothers? Because I'm worried about them being in Shechem. And so Joseph said, here I am, whatever you want, Dad. Verse 14. So he said to him, go now and see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring me word. So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a man found him wandering in the fields. And the man asked him, what are you seeking? I am seeking my brothers, he said. Tell me, please, where are they pasturing the flock? And the man said, they have gone away, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. This leads us to our fourth point. If you're asked to do a job, you will be tempted to do the minimum. Go the extra mile instead. I think we get a little picture into the character of Joseph here, because what was his dad's instructions? Go to Shechem, see if your brothers are still there. So he goes to Shechem, his brothers aren't there. Did he do the job? Yes. So you know what I would have done? Time to go back home. But what does he do? He's like, Dad wants to know where his sons are, so I'm going to go the extra mile till I find these boys, till I find my brothers. And I think that really gives us an indication into his character. He was obedient to his father, and he goes the extra mile. One of the things that should set us apart as Christians is we work different than everybody else. You should be the best worker at your job, okay? You work different. Don't be conformed to the world. Don't do what everybody else does. Don't take the easy way out. The Bible says whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. And that means sometimes going the extra mile. Jesus even talked about this in the Sermon on the Mount. If somebody compels you to go with a mile, go with them too. Go the extra mile. And character is doing what is right when no one is looking. And this is a revelation of his character. So he goes the extra mile, and it doesn't appear like it's going to work out for him, but there's a bigger plan at play. So let's read what happens. It says he goes to Dothan to find him, verse 18. Then they saw him from afar. Now, why did they see him from afar? Because of his coat. So his coat, his clothes made him stick out, so they could see him coming. And before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. So here's this problem with jealousy. It's gotten to the point where they hate him and they want him out of the picture. And They got super triggered. They saw that coat. They're like, we hate this kid. And listen to what they say. They said to one another, here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams. This is arrogant talk here. Yeah, let's see what will become of your dreams, big man. But when Reuben heard it, Reuben's the oldest, he says, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, let us not take his life. So Reuben's the voice of reason, and he says, this is too much. So Reuben said, shed no blood, throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hand to restore him to their father. So what Reuben has this plan, he talks his brothers into, let's rough him up a little bit, let's intimidate him, let's push him around, but let's not kill him. That's going too far. And what he's going to do, though, is he wants to, when his brothers are distracted, he wants to then go get him out of the pit and tell him to run home. So that's the plan. So verse 23, when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore, and they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty and there was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat. This is how callous these guys are. They just took their flesh and blood, threw him into a pit with the intention of we're going to leave him there to die, and let's go grab a cheeseburger. They sat down to eat, and looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels, bearing gum, balm, and myrrh on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, what profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. And his brothers listened to him. The Midianite traders passed by, and they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. They took Joseph to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the pit and saw Joseph was not in the pit, he tore his clothes and returned to his brothers and said, the boy is gone, and where shall I go? Now, so he knows that when they go back home, he's the one that's got to tell dad that Joseph is gone. Because he's the oldest. He's the firstborn. And he's like, where did he go? Then they took Joseph's robe and slaughtered a goat and dipped the robe in the blood, and they sent the robe of many colors and brought it to their father and said, this we have found. Please identify whether it is your son's robe or not. And he identified it and said, it is my son's robe. A fierce animal has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces. Then Jacob tore his garment, put sackcloth on his loins, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, no, I shall go down to Sheol to my son mourning. Thus his father wept for him. They're basically like, Dad, get over it. He's like, I'll never get over it. I'll never get over this. Meanwhile, the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of the Pharaoh, the captain of the guard. Number 5, and this is the last point. If you do what is right, people may hate and betray you. Do what is right anyway. If you do what is right, people may hate and betray you. Do what is right anyway. Because in the end, the more you live like Jesus, the more you can expect to be treated the way Jesus was. So trust God anyway. Now, I told you at the beginning of the sermon that there are 100 different pictures of Jesus with Joseph. Let me give you 7 of them in this chapter. Just as Joseph was as a special object of his father's love, Jesus was the special object of his father's love. Just as Joseph had divine exaltation, he had promises of divine exaltation, Jesus has promises of divine exaltation. When Jesus came the first time, he came as what? Our lamb. He came as the sacrificial lamb. But what do we know the Bible tells us that is coming to him in the future? He will come as a lion, and he will rule and reign on the earth. So it looks like the first time Jesus came, this was a terrible thing, and it didn't work out the way it should have, but he has an exaltation coming. How is Jesus and Joseph alike? They were both hated by their brothers. This is what the Bible says about Jesus. He came unto his own, and his own received him not. He was mocked and despised by his family. And Jesus was the same. Remember his parents came to him and they said, "We need to get rid of this guy. He's crazy." Jesus and Joseph were sold for pieces of silver. Joseph for 20, Jesus for 30. He was stripped of his robe. Remember what they did at Jesus' crucifixion? They took his robe and they gambled over it. They took the purple robe, the mock robe they had put on him, and they gambled over it. They took his robe and they took Joseph's robe, dipped it in blood, and took it to their father. And then Jesus was delivered up to the Gentiles just as Joseph was delivered up to the Gentiles, the Midianites. Why am I telling you all this? Well, this is the story of following Jesus. If you follow Jesus, this is what Jesus said. I love his honesty. If they persecuted me, they're going to do what? They're going to persecute you. So, we live in a time where it doesn't appear to be getting particularly better, maybe a little worse. So, I would love to stand up here and tell you that, hey, if you follow Jesus, man, nothing but straight ahead, just positive things are going to happen to you. But the reality is that following Jesus may cost you a lot. But this is what I want to leave you with, hope. But in the end, it will be worth it. Okay? So don't get discouraged when there's the dip. I'm doing the right thing and everything seems to be falling apart. You're getting bad news after bad news. I'm trying to do the right thing. And I hear this a lot as a pastor. I'm trying to do the right thing. I'm trying to follow the Bible. And it seems like instead of getting better, my life is getting worse. What's up with that? Well, Joseph, he's doing all the right things, and what's happening to him? Is he being exalted? No, it seems to be going worse and worse for him. But that's not the end of his story. And let me just encourage you, what you're going through right now is not the end of your story either. So don't get discouraged. And Joseph was a guy who always had a bigger perspective. You got to keep that bigger perspective. And I want to encourage you today, whatever you're doing that's right, keep doing it. Do it anyway, even if it doesn't seem like it's going to be good for you in the moment, but it'll be worth it in the end, okay? All right, let's go to the Lord in prayer. Lord, I do thank you for all that you have done for us. Lord, I want to pray particularly for those who are in this room right now, who are they're in a really rough stage of life. They have tried to do the right thing. They are doing the right thing, and it just doesn't seem to be working out for them. And they came in here today because they didn't know where else to go, and they're frustrated with their life, and they're frustrated with how things are working out. And maybe today was their last resort. Maybe they wanted to throw in the towel after today. They're going to give Christianity one more try. Lord, may they not give up. May they persevere. May they see the bigger picture. And I pray, Lord, for the person who may be in this room whose heart is hardened, has become hardened because of jealousy. Jealousy has taken root and it's hardened their heart. Lord, may they repent of jealousy. May they repent of the sin of jealousy, and may you begin to soften their heart again. We love you and thank you for all we have in you. May we live for you, we pray. In your name, Jesus, amen.